especially if things are bad at the national level, find a local issue that people really care about and just run on that. He's apparently going to have a reshuffle, but he absolutely needs to find, forget 5, find 2 pledges that you can actually deliver by the next election, because there's no point going in with 5 failures.
Listening to that, the chairman of the Conservative Party, Greg Hands, and I suspect Mr. Hands, welcome to the programme, thank you for joining us. Is it a little bit relieved, is that right?
Well, I think the standout result was the one in Uxbridge. That's the one that people weren't expecting.
Forgive me, we are joined, I should explain, by the experts, Professor Sir John Curtis and Chris Mason. I wouldn't be disrespectful enough to laugh at your answer, but they just did.
Well, look, Labour were 25 to 1 on last week. If you popped into a leading bookmaker, you'd get 9 to 1 against the Conservatives holding Uxbridge. Of course, there are lessons for us to learn from the disappointments in Selby and Ainsty and Somerton and Frome, where, by the way, Labour also lost their deposit there. But let's not ignore the fact that standout result, the one that's attracted the most attention and defied expectations, was the Conservatives winning in Uxbridge.
Well, I'll give you that it was a surprise, I'll give you that, and that you have reason to be pleased about it. But if you're to learn lessons, the first thing you have to do, I mean, I'm not your shrink, but I think they'd say to you is, look in the mirror, face up to reality. So when you do that, and you look in the mirror this morning as Conservative Party chairman, what do you think the electorate are telling you in the north of the country and the south of the country when they voted against your party in record numbers?
I think 2 things now. First of all, they are saying that the Conservatives need to do better. We had a very difficult year last year. The country had a difficult year last year, but that is exactly why Rishi Sunak has set the 5 priorities and delivering against those 5 priorities of halving inflation, restoring growth, cutting the debt, reducing hospital waiting lists, and stopping the votes.
Well, I'm grateful for you going through the list. You could do a shorter list of one of those 5 pledges that you're actually delivering on currently.
Well, inflation came down this past week.
It's not hard.
It's not hard yet, and there's a lot of work still to be done, and we're working hard. But
there isn't growth,
we have cut
debt's
inflation.
going up, and the boats haven't been stopped.
Well, we've just, because we've just passed the illegal migration bill through Parliament this week. But if I might say, just on Uxbridge, here
just deal with the pledges if you would. I mean, it was a man from Conservative Home who pointed out that you're not meeting these pledges, and passing a bill is not the same as stopping the boats, is it? So you accept for the moment, then, should we put it down as a can do better? For the moment, the pledges are not met, and many people think it's not on purpose.
Well, they weren't designed to be an easy thing to meet. They were designed to take some time. Rishi Sunak's been in power for 9 months. We are making progress. There's obviously still progress to be made. But the lessons from elsewhere, Nick, if I might, is that people, and this reflects a wider thing amongst the electorate. I've spoken to a lot of people, a huge number of people. I've been to Uxbridge 7 times. I've spent 3 days in Selby and Ainsty, 3 days in Somerton and Frome. I've spoken to a lot of people. And there's a real misgiving about Labour in power, and that is reflected in the Uxbridge result. It's actually Labour in power in London. 7.
On the roads this morning, Sproston Green, there's queuing traffic on Holmes Chapel Road in both directions near Fox and Hounds pub. Still getting reports that Trinity Street in Hanley is closed both directions because of an incident earlier on between Marsh Street North and Lower Foundry Street. And in Smallthorne at the top of the bank there, Hanley Road, High Lane, Moorland Road, you know the drill, you know what I'm talking about, all around the Smallthorne roundabouts. It is quite busy this morning. If you're stuck in traffic, or you know of any problem I'm not talking about on the roads this morning, then please do get in touch. The number is 0800 121 8080.
Mayor Khan, backed by Keir Starmer, did in London.
But you campaigned against it, so when you say you're not opposed to something you campaigned against...
Okay, let me explain the wider point. The wider point...
just explain the answer to the question.
Okay, the wider point is actually giving people time to make that transition. 2030, Sadiq Khan gave people 9 months to make that transition. I spoke to one man in Uxbridge, who said that to make that transition in 9 months, to get rid of their existing car, it cost him, he sold his existing car for 11,000, he bought a new van for 23,000. The government's approach is also a green policy, but to work with the grain of human nature. When people come to the point where they naturally replace their vehicle, to go for a lower emission vehicle, that is both sensible, it also costs people less at a time when we know that relaxing the pitch. Also,
Just to
I'd
be
like
clear though, I want some clarity if I could. I think you are being clear, but let me just check that I've understood it. Your message to the electorate is, if you drive a dirty car and you vote Conservative, you will still have to replace that car, you will still have to spend thousands of pounds, but you might have to spend a little bit less and a little bit later than you do now.
Well, the government policy is that people will change their car during the, if you like, the course of the lifetime of the car, when the car naturally comes up for renewal.
Just remind us who introduced the ultra-low emissions.
Well, it was introduced in central London, Nick, and there, this you need to...
Who introduced it, just for clarity?
Okay, it was introduced by Boris Johnson, the Mayor of London, but for central London, don't forget the public transport offer. I speak as a central London MP. The public transport offer in central London is crucially very different. You've got a lot of tube stations, a lot of tube
I'm
stations,
just trying to get a sense of, because there are some Conservatives who think this is a great opportunity for me. What they say is, aha, found it. You've already approved a new coal mine and you're approving new oil and gas fields for exploration too. You should, as the Conservatives, they say, now campaign against these sorts of green taxes, which were a bit of a puzzle because you did recently, as a government, require Greater Manchester Council to implement a charging clean air zone. Can you just clarify, are you in favour of these things or are you opposed to them?
Well, look, we're saying that to go with the grain of human nature, if it takes time, for example, don't forget the government policy of replacing petrol cars. We're going to cease the sale of petrol cars from the year 2030, and we announced that in 2021. So that's a 9-year transition. Sadiq Khan, who had no manifesto commitment to do this, botched the consultation, and he did a wider lesson here that Labour are not good at running things. Labour are not a competent
party. You will not, as chair of the Conservatives, allow your party to campaign against green policies and warn people that if they vote for the Labour Party, they will pay more. You won't let that happen.
What I won't let happen is people not realising that Labour is not good at running things.
No, I think you didn't answer the question again, because you've already said that.
I haven't. I'm not here to change government policy. There's government policy that petrol-driven cars be no longer sold after the year 2030.
Okay, let's move on, because I think we've got clarity about that. What does Rishi Sunak have to change as the result of voters in both Yorkshire and Somerset, in the north of England and the south of England, voting against him in huge numbers?
Well, we're obviously listening carefully to the electorate in both those constituencies. We had two excellent candidates, and it's worth pointing out again that the Lib Dems had a terrible result in Selby.
I don't want to be tiresome and keep reminding you of questions, but I'm going to. The question was, what does Rishi Sunak have to change to respond to what the electorate said to him in those areas?
We need to continue to focus on the people's priorities, particularly on focusing on getting down inflation and stopping illegal migration. We've had good work done on both those issues, particularly this past week, getting inflation further down and on delivering on the illegal migration legislation.
So the message after two of the worst by-election results that I can remember for government is steady as she goes, keep your nerve.
Well, I'm saying that we need to continue the work. It's too early to start talking about next year's general election. The people out there want to see a good, strong, competent, conservative government. They've got serious worries. As we've seen enough about the Labour government.
You do assert that what the people want, given the chance to vote for it in two parliamentary elections, they didn't. Which is why it seems not an unreasonable question to suggest that you might want to do something differently from what you're currently doing.
But by-elections are very different to general elections. The whole history of by-elections, all the way back to Orpington in 1962, there's 60 years of history of people voting against the government in by-elections. We're obviously going to listen to people, we're going to look at some of the reasons why, and look at some of those local factors. But equally, by-elections are not always a good predictor of general elections. That is what the history of 60 years has been.
Craig Hans, thank you very much indeed for taking the time, Chair of the Chairman of the Conservative Party. There and with us, as I said, Professor Sir John Curtis, and also Chris Mason. Having no respect for the man, John, but you did have a little chuckle when you suggested that the only, or not the only, that's unfair to stance, but the most significant result was wrong in Georgia.
Yeah, and there's always a risk for a political party when it decides to focus on the result for it that is rather good and decides to try to steer away from those which are not so good, that it fails to be honest with itself and therefore fails to pick up the message. But even if we include the Uxbridge result together with Selby and Somerton and look at the Conservative performance in the round, on average, the Conservative vote was down by 21 points in these three constituencies. It's very similar to the 18-point drop in the national opinion polls, and to that extent, and the Labour Party are therefore, the Conservatives in a very difficult position. And therefore, basically, the message on Thursday is that basically the Conservatives are indeed as deep an electoral hole as the opinion polls have been suggesting. So that's one point. The other point I was kind of chuckling about was how, as always, when politicians are in a slightly difficult position, they leap on what they think is the weaknesses of their opponents. So he leapt on the weakness of the Labour Party in Somerton and the weakness of the Democrats in Selby. Actually, those results are bad news for the Conservatives, because those poor results by parties that were previously third in these constituencies are occasioned by tactical voting by those parties' former supporters for the party that could best defeat the Conservatives locally. So again, the advice to the Conservatives is to be honest with yourself and don't necessarily assume that because one of your opponents does badly in a constituency while the other one does well, that this is necessarily good news for you.
Wedge issues, dividing lines.
Yeah.
And one of the, any observer of British politics will know that by-elections are often determined by wedge issues, but those wedge issues are often local ones, like ULEZ. To what extent can the Conservatives infer from last night that actually wedge issues may well be useful to them also in general elections?
I think they can infer that they are useful if they are sort of geographically focused and they can properly kind of weaponise them because they are seen to be genuinely salient. And I think in this instance they were. It was interesting hearing Greg Hands's language there in wrapping that wedge issue in the emission zone in broader, as he would see it, conservative philosophy, that idea of going with the grain of human nature rather than, if you like, big stated positions, as it might describe it. I think what was most striking when listening to Greg Hands was what you were hearing there was a guy who saw this surprising raft in the roughest of seas and was wrapping himself around it and allowing himself to imagine for a moment that it's not quite as wet as it was when he was in the water. That's kind of what you were getting. That was the sentiment of Mr. Hands. And my goodness, if you were in Greg Hands' mind and you were in his role this morning, waking up at 4 in the morning and turning on your phone or whatever, you think, oh my goodness, this round of interviews isn't going to be quite as grim as he might have anticipated if he did indeed get any sleep whatsoever.
But Chris, John, wouldn't it be fair for Conservative strategists to say there's a hint of something we can do? Heard him, the chairman of the party there, say we'll oppose Labour in power.
Yeah.
Highlight what they're doing in London, highlight what they're doing in Wales, and then say to the electorate, you don't need to look in the crystal ball, read the book, this is what these guys are like. They can build a campaign.
But if you're going to do that, you're going to have to generalise it. In the context of the general election, you have to be able to generalise that argument across the country. You cannot just try to vote on ULEZ in Uxbridge and on Labour's record on health in Bridgend. Because unlike a by-election, a general election has that overarching national campaign, and that is what most people will be following. So unless they can generalise these arguments to undermine people's confidence in Labour in general, then it won't necessarily work in the same way in the general election.
Just one of the buts, Chris. It seems to me that there'll be quite a lot of Labour people behind the scenes saying, if Tony Blair was the Liberal Party, even with ULEZ, even with this sort of local row, he would have overcome it because he'd already sealed the deal at this stage with the electorate before a general election.
And I think that's what's the fascinating sort of psychological niggle for Labour with this. Yes, there's the issue around wedge issues, their particular salience or not in particular areas. But how come an issue like that was able to be, apparently, we can't look into the minds of every voter, but was apparently the difference in Uxbridge between a Labour defeat, as happened, and a Labour victory? Does that point to a weakness that they would rather not have and that they need to work on in the next year or so? And that will be a niggle. The flip side to that is that the thing that they might have feared today, had they won 2 and the Lib Dems had won 1, was a sense of any kind of complacency or inevitability. And I guess from the Labour spinner's perspective, they'll be able to argue that a failure to win at Uxbridge, it was one counter against that.
Chris, John, for now, thank you very much indeed. More from you on the BBC throughout the day. I'm just speaking to Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg in about 7 or 8 minutes' time. But for now, we're going to Gary Richardson for the sport. Hi, Gary.
Very good morning to you once again from Hoylake. What a fantastic day of sport ahead. Second round of the Open Golf Championship. It's underway. Tommy Fleetwood, top of the leaderboard. Test match just down the road at Old Trafford. England lead Australia by 67 runs. Zach Crawley hit a brilliant 189. England resume 384 for 4. So we're underway. Golf correspondent Ian Carter is with me. What's been happening so far? How do you see the day?
Well, one of our 3 co-leaders, the Argentinian Emiliano Grillo, just underway. He's found the fairway off the first tee. He's at 5 under par alongside the amateur Christo Lamprecht from South Africa, and of course Tommy Fleetwood, who will be out not until 3 o'clock this afternoon or just before. Rory McIlroy, by the way, at level par. He'll be out just before 10 o'clock. Brian Harman at 4 under par, 1 shot off the lead. He's going to be underway in the next 20 minutes. Out there on the golf course at the moment, the Spaniard Adrian Otaegui, who flirted with the Rebel Live Tour but decided to stay with the establishment to try and make the Ryder Cup team. He's just 1 shot off the lead, level par through his first 3 holes.
I've been joined by a golf legend. He's sitting next to me. Good morning to Tom Watson, winner 5 times. Welcome. Good morning, Tom.
Nice to be here.
What made you so successful at the Open? 5 times winner.
Well, I think probably the most important thing is that I hated to lose. I'm a competitor just like most of these guys out here, all of them are. I think that was probably the most important thing. I had a great short game, just like Seve. And when you play links golf courses, you're going to miss a lot of greens. You see these guys missing a lot of greens today already, and you have to get the ball up and down. And that was right in my bailiwick. I could get the ball up and down with the best of them.
5 Opens in 8 years, though. When you look back, do you think to yourself, I'm amazed I did that? 5 of them, right?
On the roads this morning in Sandbach, Old Mill Road busy, but moving from Crewe Road to the A534. Still problems. Hanley, Trinity Street closed both directions because of a police incident from Marsh Street north to Lower Foundry Street. And in Sproston Green, there's queuing traffic on the Holmes Chapel Road in both directions near Fox and Hounds pub. If you're stuck in traffic or know of any problems, give us a call 0800 121 8080.
Assess things for him.
Well, he's been there. He's got to break through. He knows that, and he wants to. It's anybody's guess whether he will or not. But it's time for Tommy Fleetwood to step it up a notch and come out the champion.
Tell me about Rory McIlroy. He's won 4 majors, but not since 2014. Now, you did all of yours, the Opens, in the short space of time, as I've mentioned. Why do you think there's been such a long gap for him, Tom?
Well, when you're playing a career golf, you basically do have a high point in your career. And my high point in my career was in 1980. I really ran the tables from 1977 to 1983-84, but after that I struggled. I didn't win a tournament. I won a tournament in 87, and then took me to a 96 tournament. The next one, I won another 98 when I was 48 years old. But there's a stretch there that I just didn't perform, and it wasn't that I wasn't trying. I was trying just about every gimmick I could possibly find until 1994, where I found a movement in my golf swing that was lacking before, and now I put it into play. It really helped me. I really hit the ball great.
What's your hunch on who will win this Open?
Well, I said from the beginning, I think McIlroy's, he's got the inside track. I know he's 5 shots behind right now, but yesterday his putting was poor. He didn't. There was 3 or 4 putts he could have made, especially the little one they had the violent lip out. But he's 5 shots behind, and you've got weather coming in, and there's a lot that can happen.
A final thought to you. You said in your second answer about being competitive, and I said to you when you arrived, how are you? You said, well, I've got a shoulder injury, and I said, playing golf, and you said, no, I crashed the go-kart trying to beat my grandchildren on the go-kart course.
Well, I
mean,
wasn't trying to beat I was trying to go as fast as I could. I turned the go-kart over, stuck my arm out like I was going to pop the go-kart back upright. Yeah, all right. And I just crushed my shoulder.
Let's have a word from both of you. Final word. Ian Carter, come Sunday evening, you'll be commentating. Where do you see the winner?
It's very hard to say. It just, to me, I was just talking to Andrew Murray, one of our co-commentators on 5 Live. It just feels like this is a jockeying for position leaderboard at the moment. I think it's going to be a lot clearer come close of play today as to what sort of weekend we're going to get.
Yeah, and Tom, you think Rory McIlroy possibly?
Well, I think he's again right now he's sitting okay. Let's put it that way. He certainly hasn't played himself out of the tournament.
After 800 yards, take the exit, then keep left.
Closer and closer to the lead, and by Sunday.